Hi guys, welcome back. It's Dr. Saru in another episode of Med in Practice. Today I want to talk about natural contraceptive methods or natural methods of family planning. I know it's something that people are almost coming out of, considering the fact that it is not very effective in most people. But the biggest concern is there are also people who cannot actually go on the hormonal contraceptives or other forms of contraceptives because of one thing or another. There are contraindications to using the mainstream contraceptives, and so at the end of the day, the natural family planning methods are the only thing that can work for this particular group. So that is why I decided, let me gather up my facts and come together and bring them together rather and talk about these things. So I hope you enjoy today's lesson. Karibu sana. So for the first thing, periodic abstinence. Under periodic abstinence, there are several things that will come below that. For periodic abstinence, or as the word suggests, is avoiding sex in certain times. So there's the calendar method that I know most of you are familiar with, which I'll go into depth about it more. And then there's basal body temperature. And then there's cervical mucus, or how to check your cervical mucus or the discharge that comes around during the time of ovulation for you to know exactly if you're going to likelihood of pregnancy is high or low. So let's get into it. For the first method, that is calendar method, which people have been constantly using for the longest time, it basically means you have to have you need to have at least monitored your menstrual cycle for at least a year to two. Some of the research suggests at least you need a year to 2 years of having constantly monitoring your menstrual cycle for you to be able to accurately know when you can use this method and how you should use it. Yeah, because you need to be able to subtract 18 from the shortest cycle, and 11 from the longest cycle, 11 days, for you to know exactly when the safe days are going. It's not textbook per se, because some women have their menses for 21 days, some have it for 25 days, some have it for 28 days. However, there's a chart that I have linked below in one of my posts in Instagram. Please do look at it, and that is specifically for women whose cycle lasts around 28 days. So there's a women whose cycle also goes to around 35 days. So you see, that's why you need to be able to learn how long your cycle lasts and exactly how you're supposed to work around it. I know it's a bit difficult for most people trying to calculate that, and it's extremely very cumbersome also, and it doesn't work for people who have irregular periods. So that is one thing that you should consider. Not every method that I'm going to talk about today, regardless of how safe they are, it is not really workable for most women, especially if you're a working mom or a working woman. It can be a bit tiresome to try and track your period, unless of course you have use of app, or maybe you actually put a calendar down or your diary where you write and record when your period comes and when it goes and things like that. Otherwise, it can be very, very tricky for you to know exactly when your safe window is going to be. And I already mentioned irregular period. If you have irregular menses, don't even try to work with the calendar. It likely might fail you, and then you might blame somebody for it, and you don't have to go that route. Yeah. So the second thing under periodic abstinence is basal temperature. It is said the temperature normally goes down to 12 to 24 hours just before ovulation, and then it resumes back to normalcy in the next 48 to 72 hours. Now again, I've told you these methods are quite safe, considering you don't put any external or any foreign things into your body. There is no instrumentation, there's no drugs, no hormones. But the biggest concern or the biggest issue with the natural contraceptives is the fact that it's very cumbersome. because I can assure you not many women will have the time to always be checking their temperatures so that you can be able to know, okay, this is the time I'm ovulating. I want to have sex this time because I'm planning to get pregnant, or I need to abstain this at this time because I might be ovulating and I don't want to get pregnant. The third thing, which I think that one is a bit workable, and it might not be that cumbersome as the two that I've already mentioned in the periodic abstinence, is cervical mucus. So for cervical mucus, when it's around that time you're ovulating, between 2 days earlier or 1 day to another 2 extra days after the ovulation, so around, give or take, 5 days during that time when you're ovulating, your cervical mucus, or that discharge that you'll see per vaginally, it'll be egg white. It will be very, very slimy when you pull it. I've shown a picture there. When you pull it like this, you'll find it's very stretchy and very thin and almost clear all the time. So when you find out that your discharge has changed or become that light and that thin and very, very slimy at that particular time of the month, then you should be very worried, or rather you should be cautious, because you know that's the time that it's the time of ovulation. Of course, with other added signs and symptoms such as maybe bloatedness, some women complain of low abdominal pains. So such things, in addition to now that egg white vaginal discharge, it can indicate that it's during the time you're ovulating, because the other time that you're not ovulating, the mucus, or that mucus is normally very, very thick and a bit not clear as this other one was, and it keeps, when you try to stretch it, it's not very stretchable, so it breaks before you're able to stretch it all the same. So yeah, now let's go on to the number 2 part of it. Use of breastfeeding or lactation amenorrhea. So many women have realized that when they give birth and they start breastfeeding, they tend not to be having their regular menses, or menses delay for a certain time until either you've stopped exclusively breastfeeding. There's some women who their period can come even 2 months postpartum, 1 month postpartum, 3 months. But sometimes there are those who stay for longer, like the exact 6 months when you're exclusively breastfeeding, or some people even go up to a year. So for lactation amenorrhea, or when use of breastfeeding as a means of contraceptive, it's also not very effective, considering the fact that you might not be getting your period, but you can actually get pregnant at some point if you're trying to use lactation amenorrhea as your family method of family planning. Excuse me. That's why it is very important that you try to do more. You try to, especially for natural family planning methods, I normally tell my clients to try and merge 2 or 3 so that you can have something almost perfect. Of course, there's nothing perfect, but it will be closer to reducing the chances of you getting pregnant, other than just using one method of contraceptive, such as now lactation amenorrhea, or now maybe cervical mucus only, or using the calendar method. The third thing is coitus interruptus, or withdrawal, or pulling out. That basically means while you're having intercourse, when the man feels or knows that they're about to ejaculate, they're supposed to pull out from you so that they ejaculate somewhere else other than around your area, so that you avoid any likelihood of getting pregnant. Now, this method, its effectiveness is 75 to 80%. Not very good, considering the fact that there's something called precum that also normally contains spermatozoa, which can also lead to pregnancy, especially if it's within your fertility or fertile window. That is 1. 2, not every man has the talent, in quotes, or that ability to be able to pull out. So if you're depending on somebody else for your plans, I think that's a bit unfair on your side, and not to them really, because if it's something that you're doing for you, then do it for you and not the other person. Because if you're depending for somebody, it's like you're walking on the road closing your eyes and you're hoping that people will see you so that they don't knock you off. Yeah, So if you can do something about it, it's best you do something about it instead of having to wait on somebody else to do something about it. I put this point as number 4 because it's very interesting and it's very nice, and it's the only method of contraceptive that is 100% effective. Achana na coil, what else? Mirena, all those things, yeah. Pills. This one is 100% effective. I don't know if you guys have guessed it yet. But abstinence, what did you think I was about to say? Abstinence is the one that is 100% effective in ensuring that you don't get pregnant or you don't get STIs or any other thing that you can get from having sex. So I don't have to talk much about it because we already know what abstinence means. So basically it's just not having sex or celibacy or just trying to keep it cool until whatever time you decide, okay, like now I'm ready for the consequences that unprotected intercourse can bring about. So I think we've all discussed about now the four major natural family planning methods, and the number 1, which was periodic abstinence, had 3 other subtopics which we have discussed. I think I went through it when I was also discussing about each method and their cons and pros, but I'll just brush it off again so that you can be able to grasp the whole concept. So the cons, or what are the issues, the downside of having to do natural family planning is, 1, it's very cumbersome. It's extremely very cumbersome. I can't even keep up with the calendar to mark my notes sometimes, or when I'm journaling, I keep juggling which date is it. So let alone to know the last period and how long it lasted and things like that. Of course, with the use of an app, it can be doable, but again, some of us don't have very regular menses again, which makes it so tiring for you to try and figure out when and how is your fertile window. Number 2, it's not as effective as other methods because we've seen the total, or rather the approximate effectiveness, if it's a thing we can say, the estimated effectiveness for all these natural methods around 76%, as compared to other methods of contraceptives or contraception, which there are some which go up to 98%, there's some which are at 80, some 85, some at 96. So you see 76 is quite a low. So you at least have 24% chance of getting pregnant every time you try to use these methods of contraceptive. The other thing with natural contraceptives, just like with other method of contraceptives that don't include a barrier contraceptive, is there's no STI protection. So meaning, if either the guy pulls out, or you are breastfeeding, or you are using the calendar, or you were checking the temperature, or you're checking your cervical mucus, if one of you has the STI, you're definitely going to pass it to the other person. The third, so we've talked about those 3, and those are the most repeated cons. Now for before pros, yeah. The other thing is, with the natural methods, there's lack of spontaneity. You see now, especially for maybe a young married couple or a young couple, whichever, and they've just known each other and they want to be spontaneous. I take you out for a date and maybe hoping to get going with the whole process, and then you have to remember, oops, I forgot to count my calendar. Hold on, let me count my days. Let me check if my cervical mucus is thin or is thick or whatever. You see, it cannot work for spontaneity. Whereas if you took the pill in the morning, you're pretty sure that it's okay. At least I'm risking only the STIs and not the pregnancy, yeah? Now for the pros. It is inexpensive, readily available, and if done well, it is also effective. I told you 76% is not such a low percentage. It is if compared to the others, but 76 is a good enough percentage. So inexpensive, readily available, because of course if you just have to check your mucus, it's very easy. You don't have to go to the doctor or do any crazy things for you to know. The good thing also, it does not, the third thing, it does not include any hormonal exogenous hormones. That means you're not adding to whatever hormones that you already have by putting extras. If you may be taking the pill, or you're on a coil that also is hormonal, or you're on an implant, and it does not require a doctor or a healthcare worker for you to do it. As you can see there, the cons are 4 and the pros are 5, but all the same, something that I wouldn't advocate for most women, unless you have an absolute contraindication to not using the other methods of contraceptives. I hope this was enlightening, as it was for me, because I got to learn a few things actually, and I'd forgotten about some of these things, like the basal body temperature. But it was very enlightening for me, and I hope it was for you. Until next week, hope to catch you here. It's Dr. Saru, love and loud.